estate, yeah. Changing the game through real estate. I can never wait, got what it takes. It's on my plate, and I got a budget. Teach you how to say.
Kind of how you got into real estate, what drawed you to real estate, and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, essentially, just not wanting to work for somebody else for the rest of my life, and understanding that, like, in order to do that, just continuing to figure out how to expand and generate cash flow on my own. So, just read some books and started looking and doing some research, and then with the area that I was in specifically, that's kind of how I got into short-term rentals.
Do you think the area is pretty important? Because Orlando is probably a lot of tourism.
Yeah, I mean it's important and it's not because I manage right now like two properties in Tennessee that I'm not going to and seeing, and I'm managing it all from my phone. And then I also manage one for a friend's family in Panama City Beach. So it's one of those things where location of the property is important, but you can be location agnostic for actually managing and everything like that.
Okay. So why short term rentals? Why not like long term rentals or anything like that? Why short term rentals?
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing was always looking at and understanding time investment for cash flow.
Yeah.
And what you're going to commonly hear about is, for especially for short term, is generally speaking, if you buy in the right market, in the right area, at the right price point, you're going to be able to cash flow 3 to 5 times as much as you would for long term rentals. And just looking at total number of properties and doors that you would need to acquire in order to hit that, essentially my FI number,
Yeah.
is significantly less in short-term rentals than it is in long-term. And being in Orlando, especially early on in the process, with it being one of the like two of the top 10 cities in like 2018 when I was originally doing my research, were a 30-minute drive from where I live. So it allowed me to get into the game without having to, or with feeling comfortable about not being too far away from my property in case I needed to go do something myself. So it was a little bit easier from an entrance standpoint to say, hey, I'm going to do short term rentals. I'm already living in a really, really great market. So something that I'm not familiar with, I'd want to be able to go to and at least drive to the property in case something pops up, or if I want to go do something myself versus pay a handyman, then I'll be able to go set the property up and all that stuff. So it just made sense to try, and I was house hacking at the time, so it kind of just snowballed from there.
Are you like renting out the units while you live there, or are you like just buy after a year then Airbnb?
Yeah, so I first started house hacking and renting by the bedroom through Airbnb, and then I transitioned that into renting the bedrooms out long term, and then buying a property that was solely dedicated to Airbnb. And then after having that property for 6 months, I was kicking myself on why I wasn't buying more. And then I just continued to expand in Orlando, moved to my second house hack, which was a triplex that I do a combination of long term, medium term, and short term rental while living in one of the units. And then bought another short term rental in the Kissimmee area, close to where I was at specifically. And then just continuing to do research on like, hey, what are cool markets to go to and be in? What are some of the good markets to be at for short term rentals specifically? And then continued to talk about what I was doing, and had a friend's family who had a condo in Panama City Beach that they weren't happy with their management company that they were using at the time. And as my account grew and I was continuing to be fully transparent with my numbers, what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, all that kind of stuff, they were like, hey, do you want to take over the condo? And it kind of, everything just happened to fall into place with COVID happening and no longer traveling for work, so I could go work wherever. And it really allowed me the opportunity to step in and start to manage for others as well.
Oh wow! So when you're doing saying rent by the room, how does that even work? Like for do you have like a specific like lock on there, and how does that even work for like let's say if I'm an Airbnb person, I get rent by the rent by the room, and so we just all supposed to like be civil in the other areas of the house. Like I feel like that's like a
Yeah.
a lot of risk.
Yeah, it's a totally different business model, and it's not one that I recommend doing. It was the first time I ever bought a house, and I had no intention of house hacking or anything like that. Didn't even know what house hacking was. And I just started looking around. I actually had a buddy who wanted to move down to Florida from New York City, and just wanted to stay long term. He stayed for a couple months. He had a buddy that came down, stayed for a couple months. And then once I figured that out, I was like, "Hey, can I rent this in a different way to generate more cash flow?" Because they were paying $500 a month each. And once I realized that I could rent each bedroom out individually, and make $1,100-$1,200 a month, it's one of those things where it's like you're just super transparent in your listing on what the listing is. Like, hey, this is shared space. Like all the common areas are shared. You have your own bedroom. You have a shared bathroom, and just being super transparent in the listing so that there's nobody that gets the wrong idea of what they're renting out. And as long as you do that, you're getting people that are happy with the experience. They understand the experience because expectations were clearly set at the beginning. And then yeah, that's just kind of continue to snowball. I don't do that model anymore just because I think there's higher margins and less communication that you have to manage from a communication with guest standpoint when you rent out the place entirely versus doing that. And like you were saying, dealing with potential conflicts if you have two guests that are in there that maybe don't get along, or one person doesn't like how one person's doing something, whatever, you don't have to deal with that.
So what do you do about Did you furnish these units?
Yeah, so it's they're interesting, the markets that I'm buying in, because where I'm buying most of these properties are furnished. That can be a good or it can be a bad thing. 'Cause sometimes you have properties that investors are selling that just have furniture that's super outdated. Um, uh, just really really ugly properties on the inside that just need a lot of TLC, and decor updating and fixture updating and things like that. All the properties I've purchased specifically have been fully furnished with only needing some TLC and decor updates. So paintings, fixtures, those types of things. I haven't had to like replace any couches or anything like that, but painting the walls, painting the rooms, redecorating to theme a property for a certain way based off of the area. For Orlando and Kissimmee, where my two of my properties are, creating that Disney theme and that Universal theme, so that you have something that's going to pop out on pictures and add an experience element for kids and families that are coming to town. And then in the Smoky Mountains, where I have two cabins, creating that like true rustic feel of a cabin inside, all the small things that really give you a super unique experience for guests that are coming. So those were the same thing. I did a little bit more furniture shopping on those, because they had some old uh, bed frames and stuff like that, TV stands that weren't rustic looking and weren't made of wood. So I spent about like $10,000 on furniture between the two cabins, to make it feel a lot more rustic on the inside. But I think it's very specific to the market you're in, because in Kissimmee, where I'm buying, pretty much everything is fully furnished that you're buying. And then in the Smoky Mountains, it kind of depends. A lot of them are furnished, but there are still a lot of new builds or cabins that don't have any furnishings in them specifically, that you can spend, depending on how many bedrooms, you can spend $25,000 on stuff to get it ready to go.
So you were saying like it kind of it determines like what market you're in. But do you have like a certain criteria like you start out at and then you kind of change it going on? Can you like touch kind of like what your criteria is, what you're like actually looking for when you go into a new market or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it all, in a couple of different ways, because short term is super unique in the sense that, you really need to focus on making sure you're in markets that are short term rental friendly. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and said, "Hey, I want to do a short term rental in Miami is a great example." Miami has some of the strictest, the county, Miami-Dade or whatever, has some of the strictest short-term rental laws that are out there that exist. So it's like one of those counties and areas that you just want to stay away from. So making sure that the market that you're looking to invest in is very short-term rental friendly is extremely important. And what creates a short-term rental friendly market really is figuring out how is the short-term rental market generating revenue for the county. So in Kissimmee, in Osceola County, I pay 5% gross income tax back to, it's called a tourism tax, back to the county every single month.
Oh,
So every
wow.
month I file a tax return essentially with the county saying, hey, here's my gross revenue for this property for this month. And then I pay back that whatever that 5% of the gross is back to the county. So the more
That's
that
so
my
cool.
property is paying back to the county every single month in taxes, the more short-term rental friendly that county is generally going to be. So the
Yeah.
Smoky Mountains are like that's been there for so long, and it brings so much money to the county with tourism that is coming in and spending money at the restaurants and bars and all that kind of stuff. So they actually don't really. It's super cheap to get like a business license, what they call it, for to operate legally in there. I think it's like $15 a year, $20 a year, and depending on what county you're in, like that can one business license can cover all of your properties and your cabins there. So every county is super unique, but making sure that you're getting into a short term rental friendly market is one of the most important things. And then outside of that, what I'm looking for is at least 36% cash on cash return for my investment. So whatever cash I'm putting up front, I'm looking for at least a 36% cash on cash return for from a cash flow standpoint.
Okay. So for someone, let's say, like for me, like I'm looking for like house hacking, I'm looking to Airbnbs. Let's say I was gonna go to like, let's say you're a new market. What would be the best steps to like go about doing that? Like, do I just hey reach out to a lender, reach out to a realtor, and just how do I go about jumping into a new market? Because you originally were from Florida. How did you start your network in the Smoky Mountains and all that?
Yeah, so as I've continued to grow my Instagram account, I've had more and more people reach out to me and just talk about, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is whether they're asking on how to get started and or saying, hey, here's a market I'm in and the numbers are crushing it and whatnot. The Smoky Mountains was actually a guy that I met, Scrivens, grassroots wealth on Instagram.
And it's like, let's say I'm about to go into a new market and everything like that. What are the teams and like the process to kind of really jump into a new market?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is really understanding from like finding an agent and agents that are that understand short term rentals is extremely important, and it's one of the hardest things to find because real estate agents historically are real estate agents; they're not investors. And if they are investors, it's very uncommon that they're short term rental investors.
Yeah.
So anytime you talk to a real estate agent, finding somebody who's short term rental friendly is very, very important, but it is extremely hard. The way that I found this particular, like the Smoky Mountains in general, was I had a buddy who reached out and said, hey, I just bought a cabin in the Smokies. I do short term rentals in this other market, but like these numbers are absolutely insane, and I definitely recommend that you look into it. And I actually essentially just said, okay, I'm going to drive up there, and I drove from Orlando up to the Smokies 10 hours, stayed at one of his cabins for 3 or 4 nights, linked up with a real estate agent that he had used to purchase his properties, and then worked through that agent to find the lender who was going to essentially be able to get me through funding the deal more or less with a vacation loan, 10% down. And then from there, I just can continue to say, hey, I need to get more of these, and got a second one under contract within 2 weeks after I got the first one under contract. So I think it's difficult to find a short term rental friendly real estate agent, but I think it's extremely important to at least try to find and ask questions on if they understand what short-term rentals are and how the business works. But at the same time, at the end of the day, you got to be able to run your numbers and feel confident in the numbers that you're running on the property. And then as long as the agent is able to help put together the offer, continues to follow up whatever's needed on the agent side to be able to close the deal, to help close the deal with the seller's agent, then that's all that really matters. They don't have to know short term rentals, because as long as you feel confident in your numbers and you feel confident on whatever updates and the cost it's going to take to get the property up to whatever your standard's going to be, then at the end of the day, that's all that matters.
So I know, like you said, that your second to do a vacation home, like a second home, you can put 10% down. Usually your rates are pretty good. Well, how do you go about getting this the second property? Because how would because I know, like, for a vacation home, it's got to be 40 miles from your current residence. And how did you be able to say, like, hey, you're going to get two vacation properties like right next to each other? How did
Yeah,
you explain that?
yeah, the first one was a 10% down vacation loan. The second one was a 15% down conventional. So you can only, the laws or regulations, whatever, you can only get one vacation home loan per market. I don't know exactly what is considered a market, in the sense of, like, if the Smoky Mountains, like Sevierville, Pigeon Forge, um, Gatlinburg, like if those are all considered a market. But you can only get one vacation home loan per market. And then I think for vacation home loans for something that's around your personal residence, I believe it has to be like outside of 60 miles, at least 60 miles away from your personal residence, something like that. So the first one was a vacation home loan. Um, and then the second one was a 15% down, just normal conventional loan.
Okay, and your rate was probably a lot higher for that
1%.
one. Yeah, that's what I thought.
For someone who doesn't really know, talk about what figures you kind of compute together to get that 36 on 36 ratio.
Yeah, so there's a lot of data that's involved in the short-term rental world. It used to be there were two big players where you can try to work on getting what your occupancy rates are going to be, what your nightly rates are going to be, to in order to calculate what your gross income is going to be, and then subtract out whatever expenses that you would expect to have on the property. And those main two companies were called Mashvisor and AirDNA. But recently, I think in the past like 3 months, there's a company that's called Price Labs, which is actually the software I use for dynamic pricing, automatically dynamic pricing my calendars for all of my properties. And they came up with what's called a market dashboard. And because Price Labs was already intelligently pricing people's calendars for hundreds of thousands of properties across the world, it had a huge amount of data to understand what are actual places getting booked at. And what you can do with this market dashboard they created is you can pay $10 and you can get a market dashboard for a particular address, and you essentially plug in an address. You say, hey, I want to go 5 kilometers, 10 kilometers in radius outside of this address, and show me the data of what's possible here. And it'll tell you literally everything that you need to know every single day for the last year, what occupancy rates were for any size house that you want to look as far as bedrooms go. So you can go anywhere from studio 1 bedroom all the way up to 6, 7+ bedrooms. And you can dial in and understand what did nightly rates look like throughout the year, when's high season, when's low season, and then what did nightly rates also look like throughout the course of the year. And essentially what I was able to do is say, hey, let me plug this into Excel calculator that I created on my own, look at every single month, and determine based off of the data that I'm pulling and rough averages that are very much directionally correct, what I believe conservative cash flow or gross income numbers would end up being. So from being able to buy that data and run the numbers, I'm able to tell fairly quick on whether or not something's gonna be a good investment and hit that 36% cash on cash return.
So like here, we live in a beach area, so there's a lot of those weekly rentals around. But they also do like 3 to 6 month rentals during off seasons. So do you offer that as well, or you just strictly, what do you do? Weekly rentals only? Is that kind of your shortest stay?
Yeah, I do between. I will do one nights occasionally, not often, because you can get into trouble if you get guests that are there to throw a party. But typically, on all my properties, I have a 3 night minimum stay, and then in the scenario that there's a case where there's 2 nights between bookings that are open that would normally be blocked, then I'll typically open those up for 2 night bookings as well. Most of my bookings right now are between 3 and 8 or 9 nights. I don't, but I do have a 3 night minimum stay, not six, not seven, not five. And there's a couple different reasons why you want to do that. One is your listing will pop up on more searches. So naturally, if you limit it to only people that are searching for 5 nights, 6 nights, 7 nights, your listing's not going to pop up as much. And you also have the ability to really drive occupancy rates by allowing those more frequent turnovers. The last 3 months or the last, let's say, yeah, June, July, August, I think outside of one property, I pretty much every property has been at 100% occupancy, and like I'm used to having somebody check out and having somebody at 10 a.m. and having somebody check in at 4 p.m. or sometime after 4 p.m. that same day. So it's one of those things you just have to get comfortable with. There's going to be stuff that happens and whatnot where maybe your cleaners need an extra hour or whatever, and you try to coordinate with a guest and things like that. But you just have to be comfortable. You have to be comfortable with having those constant turnovers and even more frequent turnovers. I think some of the months that I've had up to 8 turnovers at a property, just because it's people that are staying 2, 3, 4 nights and then bouncing.
So is it a good business model to charge more per night when it's a shorter stay than a longer stay?
Yeah, so I will no, regardless of if it's a shorter stay or longer stay, I'll still charge the same amount. The dynamic pricing software that I use uses intelligent algorithms to determine when people are looking at for what dates, and then we'll dynamically price like weekdays, maybe 30-40% less than weekends or like whatever I deem to be weekends. So you can add all those parameters into the software if you wish, but you can't necessarily say, hey, if they're charging or if I have a Monday, Tuesday available, and they're only going to book 2 days, and go ahead and charge them more. Typically, if that those 2 days are available, in order to drive somebody to book those days, you're going to need to charge less. But the software can automatically make those adjustments for you. So if they are booking a less number of days, I'm not charging them more to accommodate for that. I'm letting the software determine what the right price is based off of whatever the specific day is and the demand for that day.
I know you said you have two in Smoky Mountain. How many Airbnbs do you have total?
Yeah, I have 5 right now.
Okay. How long did it take you to get to five? Did you just start recently, or?
Yeah, so August of 2018, I bought my first one, and
Pretty
then
good.
sorry.
I said that's pretty good if it's already 5 and since 2018.
Yeah, and so I bought my first one in August of 2018, and then I sat on that one for a year and a half, more or less. So in March of 2020 is when I closed on 2 more properties. So like right before COVID hit is when I closed on 2 more properties, and then in March of this year I closed on my first cabin in the Smokies, and then April I closed on my second cabin.
Oh wow, there you go.
So how do you get your team together? Like, do you personally go down there and hire the maids and the handymen, or does that come in? Is there a software for that? Is there?
Yeah, so there is a software for cleaning services if you're not able to find anybody. It's called Turnover B&B. Originally, I used it for my Orlando properties, and essentially with that software, you input your listing address, and you say, hey, this is a 3 bedroom, 2 bedroom, whatever, however many bathrooms, and then cleaners will actually go on there and bid for earning your like
Wow.
services. That's actually how I found my first cleaner in Orlando. That app, it depends on the market that you have. If you're in a market that's very, very heavy short-term rental friendly, you'll have a lot of cleaners on there. If you're in the middle of nowhere, I don't know how many people are actually on there, or cleaners that even know about that service. So the other way that I found has been super effective has just been the tried and true Google search for short-term rental cleaners, maid services that are familiar with short-term rentals and what that looks like. And then looking at Google reviews, calling up 3 or 4 companies, making sure that they're familiar with short-term rentals and currently are cleaning multiple short-term rentals. So knowing that they have a staff that is more than one person that you're reliant on. So I did that for cleaners in markets, and then handyman, same thing. Like I'm looking at Google reviews, I'm calling up people, I'm seeing who's answered the phone. I've also gone to properties and done the classic, hey, go to Home Depot at 7 a.m. and see who's there and just start talking to handymen that are there. Because if they're there at 7 a.m., then there's a chance that they may be good handyman. Not always, but I'll still go look at, do they have any Google reviews and things like that. But those have been the most effective ways, and those are the 2 most important team members. Your cleaners are your most important team members for short-term rentals, but your handymen are also extremely important to be able to go fix something.
Well, what about the linens? Do you do contract out for the linens and then the cleaners pick them up, or how does that work? Because I know, or do people have to bring their own?
Yeah, so I provide all linens and everything. So it depends on the market of kind of how linen services work, and the cleaner. But like the PCV condo, I took over the PCV condo after COVID, and the county made a restriction saying, if you are going to continue doing short-term rentals, then you have to do a full turn to get professionally cleaned linens inside the property. So at that point, you just had to buy like a whole separate a second set. It was really a third set because I had a second set already in the owner's closet, but I had to buy a whole second set or third set of linens, and then the cleaners would take the linens out and then bring the new ones that were professionally laundered. So that's PCB. I have a similar situation with the cleaners I use in the Smokies. They charge me $10 extra per clean, and I don't pay for linens at all. They provide linens for for my 2 cabins, so they will exchange things. Like if something gets destroyed or damaged or whatever, like I'll have to pay for a replacement fee. But there was like a small startup cost for them to purchase the initial set of linens, and then it was like I think it's a $10 extra cost that they add to each clean to just account for the linen service that they do. But they have all their professional machines and all that at their headquarters building, whatever. And then in my properties in Kissimmee, my cleaners will clean the linens in the property between cleaning.
So do you do this full? Is it full time? Do you use Airbnb? What do you
No,
do?
this is just a side hustle right now. So right now it's a side hustle. I have a full time job still, and mainly because I've wanted to make sure that I can continue to fund more deals through my W-2. Knowing that how difficult it is to fund deals once you leave the W-2. So right now I'm still doing have a full-time job and fully operating these 5 short-term rentals all on my own.
So tell us about your best performing property. Which property is performing the best?
Yeah, I would say one of my cabins called Angel's Crest in the Smokies right now. It's a 2-2. Over the summer, I had a 12,000 gross month, 14,000 gross month, and then this last month was 11,000. And the mortgage on that property is $2,000. All in expenses are like 3,500 with cleaning and maintenance and that kind of stuff. So the cash flow has been pretty crazy on that one. I obviously don't expect that. It's the summertime, so it's high season. It should be high season, at least from my understanding of the numbers I ran. So that's not normal, and I don't expect that to sustain. But right now, that's been my other cabin's doing very similar numbers, but it's been kind of crazy to see.
What price did you buy that property at?
That one was 480. So I got that property for 480, and then the other one I got for 460.
Yeah. So do you book your own properties, or are you like really hands on? I know sometimes when I've done some Airbnbs, like I was like directly talking to the owner, which I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, so I post all my stuff on Airbnb right now, and manage all the communication and everything through Airbnb. So, like if you go to one of my listings and inquire and whatnot, you'll be talking to me, and like I'll get notifications on my phone. So, usually have between 10 to 15 minutes a day of communicating with guests here and there, questions that pop up, new inquiries, that kind of stuff.
So what about your work? Do you have a worse performing property or?
Yeah, I my worst performing property, and when I say worst, talking between 600 to 1100 a month in cash flow after all expenses and everything paid, is my 2.5 bedroom in Kissimmee, and I wanted to buy when I bought my I guess it would have been my third property, but my second dedicated short term rental in Kissimmee. I wanted to test out something that was a little bit different. The first one that I bought was a 4 bedroom, 3 bathroom, can sleep 8 people, in unit townhome that had a private pool with a lanai and everything. So it had like a nice secluded area that was private and really good for families. The 3 bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, slept six, and it didn't have a private pool. I probably wouldn't buy another property that didn't have a private pool in Florida, because that easily increases the price per night by $15 to $25 depending on the time of year. And I probably wouldn't buy a 3 bedroom again. I would stick to at least a 4 bedroom property for families that are traveling to Disney. So the property is still performing well, but I wouldn't buy another 3 bedroom, 2.5 bathroom in Kissimmee that didn't have a decent sized private pool.
So you work a full time job. You have 5 Airbnbs. You manage them yourself, and like you said, I think you manage some properties for some other people. How do you find time?
Yeah, it's all about. I'm an industrial engineer by trade, so a lot of my mindset and process is how do I systematize my business and things that I do to make my life as easy as possible. So a lot of the softwares that I use to help manage my Airbnbs, and do a lot of the messaging, have saved me a significant amount of time. I also just understand fundamentally that if I want to get to where I want to go, it's going to take a little bit more effort, especially right now when I'm young, to be able to set myself up for the long term. So it's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make while I'm young, so that I mean, at the end of the day, like I could retire today and just live off the Airbnbs that I have right now, but I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I want to do in my future. So I'm
Yeah.
looking to continue to really bust my ass right now, put in the time, put in the effort, systemize my process as much as I possibly can, and then work to continue to like I will be working to outsource things here in the near future, look for VAs and create super detailed SOPs that I can hand off to teams to run, so I can focus on scaling the business versus working in the business as much as I am today. But it's just one of those things that you gotta sacrifice for the now to be able to set yourself up for the future.
Is there a way though where like for Airbnbs where you're not actually doing like all the texting and everything like it like something that sends messages to people kind of just because I feel like if you're in different time zones it'd be really hard to say hey how you like it and how you don't like it thanks for staying with us. I feel like that would get super repetitive. That'd be really hard to keep track of unless you had like a binder.
Yeah, so it is. And what I would say is I did a ton of research before looking at actually investing in short term rentals. And the beautiful thing about about it is there's people a lot smarter than you guys and myself that have figured this out, that's a big pain point for people that want to scale their business. And because of that, there's like four big players in the industry right now, but there's softwares that have been created that link directly to your Airbnb account, and you can actually go in and set up all of your messaging sequences fit like exactly when you want them to send for what property. You can customize messages for guests, so I can say, "Hey Tyler," or whoever, like, looking forward to hosting you at my property in 2 days at this address. Here's like a online guidebook that I went ahead and created to give you a little bit more information about the area and the property. 6 hours before check-in, I have a message that gives them a personalized code to get in the door on the smart lock that's at the front door. Those door codes are automated and automatically generate every time somebody books, and are deleted the second that they're supposed to check out, so at 10 a.m. So all these linking all these different softwares together, and then spending the time on the front end to set up the messaging sequence, personalized messages. Some of these softwares even have, the one I use has machine learning and machine intelligence to say, hey, if a common question I get at a property, which is one of my properties, a common question I get is can I heat the pool? So when like you continue to get the same questions, what you can do with this software, can you heat the pool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a super common question at the Kissimmee property in near Disney World. And what you can actually do is with this messaging software, you can type in that question, like how it can be asked 5 different ways, and the software will pick up that the guest is asking this question, and you can auto generate a response to the guest for whatever
That's
information
great.
they need. So there a lot of like I was saying before, a lot of what I have tried to figure out is how do I systematize my business? What softwares do I use to be able to save myself time? Because that messaging software, I would say now at my scale, now it's saving me 15 to 20 hours a week easily on messaging and copying and pasting crap that I'd have to do. And I pay $10 a month per property for it. So it's like super, super cheap. And I would honestly pay $100 a month to save the amount of time that I save with you.
Don't tell them that, they'll raise the prices.
So was it complicated, like for somebody who's not extremely techy, was that software pretty easy to set up?
I would say it isn't. It is and it isn't. So I spent over 200 hours like writing a guide that literally says in this screen, click this, copy and paste this is exact message into your thing, and then select which property and when you want to do it. So like I like do a step-by-step process for every single screen and every single messaging sequence. If you're used to softwares and programs, it's not difficult to do. You may not know what sequence to put in there because it's not going to say, hey, put these messages in there. It's just going to enable you to be able to do that. But like in my guide, I go into like every single message I set up for every property and when to send it and all that stuff, and like show exactly where to click, because you can look at and like talk through demos, but if you understand software, you'll be able to figure it out over time. But if you don't, then you're going to need a little bit of guidance to be able to get there.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good at software, like kind of at all. Um, but I guess so. Let's say, for instance, like someone wanted to get started. Do you have any like advice for them to try to get in the Airbnbs? Like what, like if I was coming to you, like Travis, I really want to do what you want to do. How does that person go about doing that, knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is, and this is what I see happen too often, and honestly was a big mistake that I made early on, is I was waiting to try to make essentially get a home run deal right out the bat, and the reality is that you don't know what you don't know until you do, and the only way you do is by actually doing. So the biggest thing is at some point you got to take the leap. If this is the path that you want to go down and this is what you want to do, at some point you got to pull the trigger on offering, getting offer accepted, getting a property set up, and testing out if your theories and numbers actually turned out to be what you thought they were going to be. The reality is you don't hit a home run on deal number one. But what's important is on deal number one, you're learning the process and you're learning and understanding the mistakes that you made on the first deal that you're not going to make on the second one, and so on and so forth. So I think the biggest thing is analyze the property, understand the market, make sure it's a friendly market for short-term rentals. If it is, pull the trigger, get the property that like you think is going to work, and at the end of the day, test out your theories and see if they were right.
Okay.
So is there anybody that's kind of regulating you? Do you have to go through any inspections or health department or?
No, don't have to go through any inspections or anything like that. You do have to get like a hotel. In every county's different, but in Osceola County, I'm trying to remember exactly what it's called. It's like a hotel license and something else. It's like $100 a year or something like that
Okay.
per property. But again, every county is a little bit different. I've never had a county actually inspect the property though in order to operate. So I'm not sure if that is the case in some counties. It may be, but it's so county specific on what counties allow you to do and essentially what you have to do in order to operate legally. I mean, anybody can operate illegally if they wanted to, but to operate legally in a county, every county is going to be very different on what the regulations are.
Yeah, because
But most of it is just like, how much do you pay me?
Yeah.
yeah. Actually, like our market over here, we just had Virginia Beach just actually just like outlawed Airbnbs like completely. I guess like the hotels were getting waxed, so they were like, oh, we're just gonna outlaw it like completely. So they allowed Airbnbs to kind of like get grandfathered in, but the ones that they won't allow new ones. So all of Virginia Beach is completely like you can't Airbnb it at all. So if
So
anyone's listening, you can look into it, but
Yeah.
Virginia Beach is pointless.
yeah, so and that's why I continue to say every time somebody asks me about a new market or whatever, I'm like, be super careful. Make sure you understand the laws and the regulations because there is more and more, especially bigger cities. There's more and more hotel lobbyists that are that are paying county officials millions and millions of dollars because hotels understand that their biggest risk is Airbnbs and short-term rentals. Like
Yeah.
they understand they can't offer an experience like an Airbnb host can. It's not even close. The price points aren't even close unless you're talking about like if you're talking about really high end properties, then that's a different story. But they can't compete, and they know they can't compete. So the easiest thing for them to do is hold down their territory, and the easiest way to do that is to pay officials in the county to ban short term rentals. So it is common, and that's why you have to find counties and markets that are very very short term rental friendly, where the short term rental operators are paying just like the hotels do in their taxes to make sure that the county gets their cut.
Yeah, I didn't
Everybody
know
wants their
about
money.
the you having to pay the county a certain percentages.
So something interesting that I want to make sure I bring up. So the Osceola County tax is a tourism tax is 5%. The cool thing though that Airbnb did, I think last year or the year before, is they allowed hosts to pass on taxes to the guest. So in all of my listings now, I put in my you're allowed to like say, hey, add a tax that I'm gonna get. Like Airbnb is gonna pay me out, but I'm gonna remit back to the tax to the county. And actually in Sevierville, they do it even better where I just put in my license number and Airbnb automatically pays the county. So I don't have to touch the money at all, which is awesome. But the tourism tax in Osceola County, I'm able to put my license number in there, or I forgot what number exactly I put in there, but I'm able to put my number in there, and then I'm able to add that tax back to the guests. So I have a 5% tax that is just lumped into the big tax number that the guests pay. But that's actually it's called a pass-through tax, and it's separated out as a separate line item on my payout emails from Airbnb. But I get that money. I make that as gross income, but I'm remitting it back to the county. So even though it is a tax, I'm technically not quote unquote paying it. I'm just more or less sending it to the county every month.
So for you to accumulate your 5 properties, do you just like buy one, save, buy another one? Are you all like just save, put in the next one, save, put in the next one? Do you bring on partners? Is just all you like the lone wolf that's taking it on?
Yeah, so I've been very strategic about hacking every part of my life that I can to save as much money as I can,
Oh, I understand.
with house hacking and not driving a nice car and all that stuff. So, um, and I'm also super fortunate to be at the right place at the right time and work really, really hard in my W-2, where when I was with Walmart, I was making over 350,000 a year. Now I'm making over 450,000 a year in my W-2. So I've been able to really fund all of the investments, but like literally everything is just being dumped into investments right now. So I've been super fortunate in that sense, where everything that I have right now is 100% funded by myself. But at some point, I will be getting into partnering and other things like that.
Hmm. All right.
Yeah, impressive.
Yeah. So I guess wrapping up, where can people learn more about you or learn about your I get what did you say it was like an ebook that or the guide that you said or how
Yeah.
can they
Yeah, the best place to reach out to me is through Instagram, at the Young Retiree by 33, and yeah, the guide that I have is on there, and it's in the link in my bio. So I try to respond to everybody within at least 24 hours that reaches out, as long as I'm active and getting on, which has been frequent of late.
So what's your purpose? What's your goal going forward? Just to keep building properties? What drives you to just keep on going and going?
Yeah, I think it's time freedom, really. The more and more I've continued to learn about like where people are at and getting feedback from mentors and things like that, the thing that I continue to hear and see is that doesn't matter how wealthy you are, the only thing you can't buy back is time.
Oh yeah.
And I have no aspirations to work for somebody else till I'm 65 years old and retire and then enjoy the later part of life, when I'm not as mobile and whatever. So for me, it's always been being able to spend my time doing what I want when I want with who I want, and not having to answer to somebody else, and really like funding other people's dreams.
Okay.